So the eye patch is not a prop. I detached my retina on Friday. Yeah, so it has nothing to do with this story, but I'll try to work it in somewhere. So I'm in an amphitheater. It's a big amphitheater. There are many, many rows. I'm down in the bottom of it. Huge amphitheater. All around me are singers, lots of singers. And I look up there and they're all dressed identically. They're all in tuxedos and they have little glasses and they have little song sheets in front of them. And I look closely and they're not people, they're owls. There are all these owls. It's a chorus of owls, thousands of them. They're all identical, dressed alike. And down at the bottom is an owl conductor. And he's waving his wand, and all these owls are singing to me, and I'm the only person in the amphitheater. So my story begins in May of 2015. I hadn't been feeling very well for a long time. I was lethargic, I was kind of depressed. I started going to doctors, doctor after doctor after doctor, getting different tests. And on this particular day, I was in Herndon getting a gallbladder scan. And it was an ultrasound, and the technician was doing the ultrasound thing with me, and she's looking at it, and she starts to get a little concern on her face. And she says, I'm gonna go get my supervisor. I'm like, okay. So she goes to get her supervisor, and they're doing the ultrasound thing, and they're looking at it, and she gets a little furrowed brow as well. And they look at me and say, there's a shadow on your pancreas. And the alarm bells go off. But I don't want to panic, so they send me down the hall, I get a CT scan. I come back about an hour. Meanwhile, I call my wife, she comes over. I said, I think you better be here. I come in and she says, well, it looks like you have a couple of tumors on your pancreas. Well, now I know I'm in trouble. I know about pancreatic cancer. I know it's about the most lethal disease you can get. And so we make an appointment quickly. We talk to some people. What do you do? We go to Johns Hopkins for an appointment. And I met with 3 of their doctors. And sure enough, they did another CT scan, and they came back to me and said, well, you have 2 tumors on your pancreas. One of them is about the size of a golf ball on your tail of your pancreas. And the other one's really kind of problematic because it's wrapped around an artery. And arteries can't be resected. So they're pretty hard to remove. So I knew I was in trouble there. They said, the good news, it's not advanced. It hasn't metastasized. So the recommendation that they made was we're going to do chemotherapy, we're going to do radiation, and we hope we can do enough to take these tumors out. Because if we can get the tumors out, your odds go way up. And so that was the story. So we went home, we did a little research, we found out the 5-year survival rate for pancreatic cancer was 6%. So 1 out of 16 people. And at this point, I'm getting a little concerned. So immediately go into chemotherapy, and it starts with an orientation session. And in the orientation session, they can tell you everything you can expect with chemotherapy. There's nausea, there's diarrhea, there's bone pain, there's mouth sores. For 2 hours, they tell you things that you might expect. The list is about as long as a CVS receipt. And I remember thinking at the time, well, it'd be a lot shorter if they just tell you things you might not expect if you go through chemotherapy, like talk like a pirate syndrome. Arg. Bring the eye patch into it, right? So a week later, I started chemotherapy, and they didn't lie to me. They told me the truth. Chemotherapy was pretty nasty. And the first drug, after the first drug, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I was so fatigued, I could barely lift my head up off the couch, the recliner. The second drug actually gave me a series of hallucinations. Just every 10-second hallucination, bang, 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 like reels you see on Facebook. And one of the hallucinations happened to be a chorus of owls. And that's the only one I remember. I wish I'd written them down. They'd be great now. I could do something with them. I could make some money telling stories. But that's the one I remember, is this chorus of owls singing to me. And so that was the second drug. And then there was a third drug, which had me going to the bathroom about every 10 minutes. And then a fourth drug, which they actually put in a little pump that I got to take home with me for 36 more hours of chemotherapy. And that was to be my chemotherapy regimen for 12 weeks. Well, for 12 sessions, 24 weeks. And so I started doing that. And it was after the first chemotherapy, that I started to realize, since I've got cancer, people are really being nice to me. I can say stupid things and they're like, oh yeah, okay, you're right. I could say mean things, and I go, no big deal. And I started to think having cancer is kind of like a superpower. Like I'm bulletproof. And I got this idea to do a comic strip about a character with cancer. And thus began the adventures of Cancer Guy with my alter ego, who wore a fedora. And the first name that came to me was Harry Flugelhorn. So Harry Flugelhorn became Cancer Guy. And so in the time between chemotherapy sessions, when I felt well enough, I would work on my comic strip. So in the first panel, Harry discovers he has cancer, and he says, okay, I have cancer. What do I do now? Do I tell my friends? Do I tell my family? Do I keep it to myself? Do I still have to floss? Okay, so that was the first panel of 9 strips, and then I went into my second chemotherapy session, and Harry had some more experiences, and he thought about those afterwards. And one of the things he discovered after the second session is that he had gas. I mean, bad gas, terrible gas. And with all those chemicals in his body, it was nothing human. It was awful. It was like driving down the Jersey Turnpike. And so in the comic strip, Harry's sitting at the dinner table, and he lets one rip, and his son goes, that's okay, Dad. And the daughter goes, okay, no big deal. And meanwhile, the dog flops over on the floor and goes, oh my God. So that was chemotherapy session number 2. And then came number 3 and number 4, and different things happened. And on one of the succeeding chemotherapy trips, I used to take my dog for a walk in the woods when I felt well enough. And one day I was taking my dog in the woods. Well, it was Harry, actually. Harry taking the dog for a walk in the woods. And Harry had a diarrhea attack. So he leaned back behind a tree and dropped his pants, and he did his business. And the dog starts barking wildly, and everybody in the woods starts looking over, and Harry goes, no, no, no. So that was week 4, week 5, somewhere like that. So this went on for a while, session after session. I ended up doing 12 sessions of chemotherapy. I was actually very fortunate because a lot of people can't tolerate chemotherapy. It's really pretty nasty. I ended up losing 35 pounds. And by the time of the last chemotherapy, it was pretty hard to recover during the 2-week period. But I made it through, and I got, the next step was going to be radiation. And the standard protocol for radiation at the time was 30 sessions of radiation. So 30 consecutive days. And, but there was a new protocol that was 5 sessions, and it was very targeted radiation. And it was more effective and far cheaper than doing 30 sessions. But you know what? The insurance companies didn't approve of that one. So they said, well, you need to do the 30 sessions. Well, we ended up paying out of pocket, and we went ahead and did the 5 sessions. And in that one, they actually implanted a gold piece right on the tumors so they could be very precise with that high-powered radiation. And Harry in his comic strip says, well, I don't know about the radiation, but maybe I could keep these gold pieces. So I got through radiation. It was actually far easier than chemo. And that, how are we doing on time? Am I going too fast? So we got through radiation, and now we're coming up on December of 2015. And I'm starting to think about surgery. And all along the doctors had said, you know, we're probably not going to be able to get these tumors out, but maybe. And I started to realize, okay, what's going to happen is I'm going to go into surgery, and they're going to put this mask on my face, and I'm going to be out. And the next thing I know when I wake up is they're going to tell me whether I'm going to live or die, probably. And the thought was surreal to think about that. But Harry, when he wrote about it, he had the doctor coming with this chainsaw to do the surgery, and that didn't work so well. So sure enough, January 29th, I'll never forget that date, of 2016, I went into surgery, and the doctor, my wife and I, at that time, we sat down and thought, well, what are my odds of being successful here? And we figured it was probably about 5% or 25% of successful surgery. We didn't really know, but we knew how problematic that one tumor was. And when they did CT scans, they could still see the tumor, but they didn't know it was live tissue or dead tissue. They didn't know if they're going to be successful or not. And the last thing the doctor says to me, you know, we may just have to open you up and look and close you up, and I'll be talking to you an hour from now. I said, I know that. So they do that. They put the mask over my face, and I start counting down 10, 9, 8. And I wake up 8 hours later. Not 8 hours to me, it was instantaneous to me. And I see the doctor in front of me, and he says, well, we did it. We got them all out. He said, I sewed you up nice and tight. So it was, obviously, it was a moment of elation. You might have known that was going to happen, because I am standing here. Thank you. You know, I get a lot of like nice words and admiration from people, but really I didn't do anything. There was no plan B. So anyway, I go into recovery from surgery, and it was, you know, I was hurting a little bit. And the second night of recovery, they give you the pain pump, right? Every time you're in pain, you press the pump. And it only pumps every 10 minutes, so you don't overdose. Well, apparently I'm kind of susceptible to opiates because I overdosed on Dilaudid. And I woke up at 5 a.m. in the hospital, and I'm freaking out. My body's in convulsions. I'm having hallucinations again. I'm shaking. And I start yelling, help me, help me, help me. And nobody's in the hospital. It's 5 a.m. on a Sunday. And so for 2 hours, I'm lying there shaking in bed. And eventually they come, and they say, okay, all right, we'll take care of you. And I said, can you give me something? They say, no. You might be having a seizure. We can't give you anything. We need to get a CT scan. Well, it turns out Johns Hopkins is like 6 hospital buildings covering about 3 city blocks. And to get a CT scan, they had to wheel my bed through 6 buildings. It took them about 45 minutes of wheeling my hospital bed through this place. And I'm looking up at the ceiling the whole time, having convulsions. And all I can think about is that little boy in The Shining on his little tricycle going through these buildings. But eventually they get me over for the CT scan, and the CT scan is clean, like I told them it would. I told them I'm just overdosing here, no big deal. So they get me back, and sure enough, I get into recovery, and things go pretty smoothly, and over the next few months, I'm starting to gain weight back, and I'm recovering. And since that time, over the next 4 years, I had 3 reoccurrences. I had little tiny tumors in my liver that they caught, but they're catching them very quickly now because I got scanned every 3 months. So they treated the first one with more chemo, naturally. And the second one, they said, you know, we're going to use radiation this time. We want to kill that whole area of your liver. And then the third one was a little tumor in my lung, which they took out with arthroscopic surgery. They took out a little piece of my lung, just a little piece. I saved it on the mantelpiece. And so I got through that. And since then, about 5 years from now, I've been clean. No more cancer. Thank you. So a lot of my cancer experience, I've kind of put in a box over here in my mind, and I don't think about it very often. But I happened to be at a bar. I was at Jimmy's in Herndon the other night, outdoors. And I looked up at the sky and the moon, and for some reason, it came back to me what it was like lying in that chemo chair. Because chemo was really the horrible part of having cancer. And for some reason, that vision of the owls came back to me for the first time. And you know, this time I could actually hear them singing. And they were singing, "Here Comes the Sun." That's my story. Thank you.